I can, oh, okay, so I can do that. Stop.
And the CCGG as a whole for this opportunity to share some of our findings from an assessment of our senior services master plan that led to practical mobility solutions for our older adult population, as well as citywide. Steve?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Kim, Recreation Supervisor, the City of Los Alamitos. And in conjunction with this resource and this Senior Services Master Plan, it kind of all came to fruition. We had done a lot of research for an alternative transportation service for our older adult population. And I'll go into more detail of how this came to be, but yeah, it kind of all came to fruition to um, with grants and the Senior Services Master Plan and just the flexibility of the grant and vendors that we were able to work with.
So, through the Senior Services Master Plan, the need was clear that getting around locally can become a barrier to healthy aging in place. So, transportation barriers were found to lead to missed appointments, fewer errands completed, less participation in community life, perhaps also contributing to food insecurity. Older adults often need safe, affordable, easy to use options close to their home. The city chose to treat mobility as a quality of life issue, not just a transit issue.
So, like Tara mentioned, we had been doing a lot of research prior to Um, moving forward with the Senior Services Master Plan. We looked at public transportation, we looked at taxi services, we looked at the on-demand options like Uber and Lyft, and n none of those options were necessarily meeting our expectations of what we wanted here in the city. And so we embarked on this Senior Services Master Plan. We partnered with Gero Fusion LLC. They're two doctors out of Cal State Fullerton, Dr. Melanie Horn-Mallers and Dr. Laurel Rosetta Watson. They're in the gerontology department. And we had done outreach surveys for and focus groups for over a year to gather as much data as we could. And essentially, with this Senior Services Master Plan, it would pretty much plan out the next 20 years of how we would look at mobility and transportation for our older adults. And at this time, I was also doing some research on different grants and funding opportunities through OCTA, the Orange County Transportation Authority. One program that they had was the Senior Mobility Program, but it wasn't going to provide enough funding for what we wanted here in the city. And so another grant opportunity came up. It was Project V through their Measure M funding. But the caveat with that was that grant was to be utilized to supplement public transportation. So currently we have our bus routes here in Los Alamitos, and whatever transportation resource that we were going to provide had to be citywide and had to be supplemental to what we already had. So with the adoption of the Senior Services Master Plan, we had to get a little creative on what we wanted to do in order to utilize those grant funding. And so what we did was we tied in the citywide transportation, this on-demand citywide transportation, and added a, I guess you would call it like an aspect of that transportation program to include older adults and to provide free transportation for, like Tara mentioned, for older adults 50 and over. Again, to provide that individualized on-demand, door-to-door transportation service for our older adult community to again reach that goal in our senior services master plan of providing reliable, dependable, high quality transportation for our older adults. So we presented it, got the funding through OCTA, and we were able to bring on our community development department, development services department to really again partner with us and assist us with the implementation of this transportation program for the whole city. And we're able to move forward, get city council's approval to go out and reach out to vendors. We're able to secure a vendor. Some of you may or the vendor circuit. They're starting to really expand here in Southern California with their services, and we're able to move forward with them. And with bringing them on board, we're able to again maintain that level of quality that we want for our older adults and this transportation program. So we're able to again um, establish this transportation program, which met our expectations throughout the city.
Thank you, Steve. So LoSal Link launched January 6th of this year as an on-demand, 100% electric transportation service operated with the agency or contracted with Circuit. So as said before, it is citywide and open to all. It's free for riders 50 and older. If you're under 50, it's $2.50 for each ride. You can book the rides just like, say, like a Uber or a Lyft by an app. If you prefer phone, you can call in the phone dispatch and request your ride as well. Service is designed for short local trips. So Los Alamitos is a very kind of intimate, small city. So we're able to offer that transportation within the city boundaries. And we have two sedans that are EV, and then we have a VW bus, and then we have a wheelchair accessible vehicle included in the fleet. So really trying to reach the whole city. I think it's important. A lot of times we may kind of isolate one group from another. This is an opportunity for people to even share a ride with someone of a different age, intergenerationally. Say a grandma and a grandchild, to be able to have access to do things together, maybe after grandma's not driving. We often find parking is a big struggle for a lot of everybody. So we also, I will kind of state, if you want to avoid having to find parking, you could use LoSal Link, which is really great for all the activities here at our community center, because our parking lot is sometimes a challenge, especially if we're looking for our wheelchair accessible spots. So we really looked at it as a small city solution with a very human job, just to make everyday life a little bit easier.
And so the main goal again was to enhance quality of life for everybody. I mean, when you're looking at a demographic of 50 plus, you're looking at 50 to 90 plus. They could be anywhere from just within that age group, 2 to 3 generations of people who all need to go to doctor's visits. They need to go to the pharmacy to pick up medicine, need to go get their grocery shopping done. And again, the goal was to get them to socialize and get them to move and be active in the community. And we wanted to limit as many barriers as possible for that to happen. Like Tara mentioned, the free cost, the ability to ride share with whether it's family members or friends. They can get picked up all together and all go to Target to do their grocery shopping, or they can go to the salon, right, to get their hair or nails done, or they can go to doctor's appointments together. or they can come to the community center and take advantage of all the free programming or low-cost programming that we have here at the community center. So the biggest goal, again, was to provide that high-quality service door to door on demand for them to be more active in the community, to again increase quality of life, to increase their mobility in the community. And it's not only for the residents of Los Alamitos, it's as long as you're within the city limits of Los Alamitos, you can utilize this transportation program. So even local nearby cities like Seal Beach and Long Beach, we tell them, hey, as long as you can get to within the service area, you can take advantage of this transportation option. So we have a large older adult community in Seal Beach called Leisure World. They're always asking about it. We tell them, hey, there's a shopping center that takes them from Leisure World to the shopping center via their shuttle. Once they get to that shopping center, they can utilize that app to get to our community center, to get to a doctor's appointment, to get to a salon. So we're always finding creative ways for them to utilize the program and increase their mobility. And like Tara mentioned, there's some that can no longer drive or just not as confident as they used to be. This again supplements their ability and transportation options to maintain active in the community, right? In being active in our programs. And again, the goal was to just reduce isolation so we can increase socialization for this demographic and making participation in activities and events as easy as possible.
Thank you. So why it matters. LoSal Link shows what happens when planning, community feedback, and implementation line up. So as Steve had mentioned, with Gero Fusion conducting assessments, needs assessments for our older adult and community members, which resulted in our senior master plan, which is currently looking at a 10-year plan of different services to be rendered to our older adult population. You can see that on our website for the city of Los Alamitos. You can see the senior master plan. We're ahead of schedule, happy to say. Our team within the first year have pretty much addressed the 5-year expectation. We want to grow it even within what we've already found. But I think these are needs that represent our greater community. So if you have questions or ideas that you want to perhaps apply to your city or within a group that you're working with, please feel free to reach out to us. Gero Fusion, again, was really wonderful and instrumental in collecting the data, assessing the data, and coming up with our goals. So it really translates a long-range master plan into a visible, practical service that supports dignity, choice, and belonging for older adults. I think we know this is a growing population, or the largest growing population within our country, and they are not a silo. We are all interconnected. So looking at supporting our sandwich generation that is managing, supporting their parents as well as their children, that this is just one of the many tools that hopefully can support the whole community, and especially our older adult population. So LoSal Link was born from listening to older adults and acting on what they said they needed most, a reliable way to stay engaged in everyday community life. As we know, the goal of aging in place is what we're striving for, and I think this is a perfect example of that. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Tara and Steve. This is wonderful. So I already see one question from Vida. How are you tracking the data, especially quality of life?
Okay. Steve, do you want to take that one, or?
So typically it's just feedback number one, we'll get data from the vendors on driver reviews, but also just people who are utilizing the service. We'll chat with them, converse with them one-on-one to get some feedback from them. So, but no like qualitative data that we're collecting.
We do have like a 5-star rating, kind of like a Uber, that our drivers kind of identify. And then Circuit, when we ask for like monthly reports on how many rides are generated, we have like a heat map. We also have the certain days of the week, which are, perhaps more utilized than others. It does run Tuesday to Saturday. So kind of looking at what days are most used and preparing for growth, because Steve and I were reviewing the data, and it's pretty much like doubling every month the amount of usage.
Tasha, so yes, we did look at the county's aging plan in place, or the aging plan that the county has. It was, I guess, general in a sense, and we wanted something more specific for our community. So that's why we did our city's own senior services master plan, so that way we can kind of get down to the details of what specific needs the community had for the city.
Thank you, Mary, for that. Yeah, and all our data, if we can give you more information if you like, and a plan of putting out a quick start guide if another city wants to do this. I would say we're still a bit infantile in our process, but of course willing to share whatever data we have, and really hope that perhaps state funding can recognize this as an essential for all cities.
Yeah, I think this presents a lot of great potential. So I can see that in a lot of us, listening to your presentation, I feel really excited about this too. And it's very impressive to be ahead of your schedule. Usually it doesn't happen that.
We have a great team,
Yeah.
honestly. We have a great team.
Thank you so much for sharing that great presentation. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next one. Um, so Natasha, so Tara, if you can stop sharing so that we can transition to the second presentation. Great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
Tara,
takes a sec. Yeah,
can you stop share?
I think she's working on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think she was busy answering questions in the chat too.
Okay.
Let me see. Steve is working on it. Let me check in.
There you go. Great. Yes. Yeah, so Natasha, please go ahead and start your presentation.
There we go. I'm finally unmuted. Good morning, and I want to thank you for inviting me to do this presentation. This, as I mentioned in the intro, is my directed project for my thesis project at Cal State Long Beach for my master's in gerontology. I just wanted to start out with kind of an overview of the project. And just very quickly, I became interested in this from my personal experience with my dad having dementia. And this was quite a while ago, but I felt like there was this prevalent attitude of there was just nothing you could do to try to lower your risk of getting dementia. And then fast forward now, it's been over 20 years, things have really changed in this field. But that's what initially caught my interest in pursuing a degree in gerontology. So, and it just kind of ended up that this was my project in the end. And in this presentation, I'm briefly going to review the problem that the project was designed to address and what emerged out of my research and the program objectives I developed, the methodologies I used, and finally the program that I built. And after I built the program, I sent it out to a panel of experts to review it. So we'll go over those results. And then I'll talk about the implications and the next steps for this program. Okay. I think everyone in this group knows that dementia is one of the biggest public health problems that we're facing in the 21st century. And as of 2025, 7.5 million Americans were living with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or related dementia. And that number would be much, much higher if we included those cases that have gone undiagnosed, especially in underserved communities and ethnically diverse populations, because these groups are less likely to receive a timely diagnosis due to a combination of cultural and healthcare access barriers. The statistics show clearly there are disparities. African American, Latino, Native American, and Native Alaskan populations all experience higher rates of dementia, and women are nearly twice as likely to develop the disease. Although there have been some promising advances in drug treatments in the last several years, which I'm sure we've all heard about, there's still no cure or an effective way to slow or halt the disease of dementia once it sets in. What we do know is that dementia is a multifactorial disease, meaning that it is not caused by a single mechanism like a genetic flaw, though genetics can play a role, they do not always. But it's driven by a complex interaction of genetic, lifestyle, environmental, and psychosocial factors. Because it is a multifactorial, multi-causal structure, many scientists believe that a single drug therapy solution is very unlikely at this point, and that the disease needs to be addressed through multiple pathways. So why is this important? To begin with, the financial impact alone is staggering, with costs estimating at $400 billion annually just in the United States. And that doesn't fully capture the emotional, physical, and financial toll on care partners and families. At the same time, we're facing a shortage of trained providers and a rapidly aging population, with adults over 65 expected to make up over 20% of the US population in the coming decade. This places an increasing and unsustainable burden on our healthcare system. All of this combined with a heartbreaking reality that for individuals affected with the disease of dementia, that they will lose their independence prematurely and endure a level of impairment that will affect every single aspect of their lives and their loved ones' lives. Because of the urgency and lack of effective treatment, some researchers in the field have begun looking at the problem through a preventative lens that addresses the problem through lifestyle intervention and close cardiometabolic monitoring, targeting factors like physical activity, nutrition, social connection, cognitive engagement, and cardiometabolic health. The research really got off the ground with the Finnish geriatric intervention study to prevent cognitive impairment and disability, also known as the FINGER trial. This was a large multi-domain study in Finland that looked at the potential for a structured lifestyle intervention program to improve cognitive function in older adults. Since then, this framework has expanded through the FINGER network with studies across Europe, Asia, and Latin America. And the recent landmark study in the US called the US Pointer Study, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, that came in over the past summer, which also demonstrated that structured multi-domain lifestyle intervention can reduce dementia risk in older adults more effectively than just people going at it their own. And according to the 2024 Lancet Commission on Dementia Care and Treatment, Up to 40% of dementia cases could be preventable or delayed with addressing modifiable risk factors. The multi-domain lifestyle intervention approach highlights a major opportunity in brain health in aging. And this is exactly where my project begins. First, I did research in the form of a literature review. And this revealed that brain health is the cornerstone of healthy aging. It supports independence, memory, decision-making, and it plays a key role in reducing the risk of cognitive decline. The literature also confirmed that dementia continues to be a growing global concern, with significant implications for individuals, families, and healthcare systems. The outlook is particularly concerning due to the aging populations and the rising prevalence of the disease, and substantial economic human toll, including financial costs and caregiver burden and loss of independence. Research has shown that dementia risk is influenced by genetic, environmental, and modifiable risk factors. Importantly, a large proportion of cases may be delayed or even prevented by addressing lifestyle risk factors such as physical inactivity and poor nutrition. One of the most influential studies, the Finger study, as I just mentioned, a 2-year landmark study, demonstrated that these structured lifestyle interventions can really make a difference. This was followed with the Pointer study, which also demonstrated that these structured interventions make a difference. Together, these approaches have led to a framework for intervention programs addressing modifiable risk factors. In addition, I looked at mindful-based interventions, which have been shown to support habit formation, stress regulation, and improve long-term adherence to lifestyle changes in studies ranging from reducing binge eating disorder to smoking cessation and to drug addiction relapse prevention, as well as the use of mindful-based techniques in DBT therapy, a popular psychotherapy modality used to support behavior change in a variety of settings. The literature also emphasized the importance of designing programs specifically for older adult learning, using clear structure, engagement, and strategies and practical applications to support meaningful participation and sustained behavior change. Together, this body of research provided a foundation for a structured, multi-domain, community-based approach to brain health promotion. And that is what informed the development of the Navigating North program. Okay. The objectives of this project were centered around 2 main goals. First, to translate current research into practical evidence. I used evidence from Finger and Pointer studies, along with insights from consultations with professionals involved directly with translating these studies into community and municipal programs. The goal was to translate this information into structured, practical program that can be delivered into a real-world community setting for community-dwelling adults. The second objective was to develop a comprehensive facilitator guide curriculum and ready-to-use program materials. This involved designing a 12-module program using key domains of brain health. Each session follows a consistent structure combined with brief lectures, movement, cognitive activities, peer discussion, and mindfulness practices to support engagement while reducing cognitive load for older adults. A key focus was incorporating behavior change strategies such as mindfulness techniques and something called peer pods, which I developed, which is a small group of individuals which would help participants not only learn the material, but maintain these lifestyles over time. It was also important that the program be culturally responsive and participant-centered, ensuring its relevance and engaging across diverse populations. And it would also help to support long-term behavioral change. Methodology. For this program, I used a program development and design approach because the goal was to translate existing evidence into a practical real-world intervention. My research began with a comprehensive literature review, as I mentioned. I also incorporated expert consultations with professionals in gerontology, public health, and individuals from the Finger Brain Health Institute and the U.S. Pointer team to understand how these teams were translating the research into community-based programming. I learned that in Sweden, the programs have been implemented in a wide variety of regions, and they were different based on resources, staffing, and regional needs. Apart from the original Train Your Brain program, which followed the finger trial framework very rigorously, the other programs have evolved largely based on the local needs and settings. The U.S. Pointer team is currently developing guidelines for dementia risk reduction programs in a variety of settings. However, this information is not yet available to the public. Based on this research, I developed a 12-week multi-domain curriculum and a facilitator guide that integrates physical activity, nutrition, cognitive engagement, and social connection. I added the mindfulness-based strategies to enhance the program adherence and reduce participant stress. Let me take you through a brief walk through the program. Each session integrates multiple domains of brain health to reflect how these factors interact in daily life. A key of the program is its focus on real-life application. Participants engage in everyday tasks like meal planning, organizing medications, or preparing for social events, helping to strengthen memory and executive function in ways that directly support independence. Participants are also placed into peer pods, small groups of 2 or 3 individuals, who serve as accountability partners and sources of encouragement. They are encouraged to build relationships that will extend beyond the program, creating a support system they can rely on when challenges inevitably arise. Along with mindfulness-based practices, these serve as a scaffolding to support long-term adherence to the lifestyle changes that they will be making. The program also prepares for participants for real-life disruptions. Several sessions are dedicated to planning for situations where participants may get off track or be temporarily derailed due to life events or illness, helping them develop realistic strategies to re-engage. Each session follows a consistent structure, including movement, social interaction, a brief educational component, cognitive or functional activities, mindfulness practice, and peer pod discussions. This reinforces learning while remaining flexible and adaptable. The program extends beyond the 12 weeks through structured monthly follow-up meetings for 2 years, supporting long-term maintenance of lifestyle changes. Once the program was developed, it was reviewed by an expert panel of professionals with backgrounds in gerontology, dementia, program development, clinical practice, and social services. Their feedback was used to refine the structure, strengthen implementation readiness, and align better with the program's community needs. Okay, the results from the expert panel review were overall very strong and highly encouraging for the development of this program. Across the board, panelists showed strong support for the program's evidence-informed foundation, as well as its clarity and alignment with the Finger and U.S. Pointer frameworks. The multi-domain structure of the 12-week cohort model received high ratings, especially in terms of appropriateness and participant engagement. The program was also seen as feasible for community implementation and scalable beyond a pilot, with strong support for partnerships and real-world application. Additionally, key features such as integration of domains, mindfulness, and adherence strategies were considered consistently rated well-balanced and effective. However, some feedback was more mixed, particularly around cultural adaptability and access barriers, which helped identify important areas for improvement. Finally, qualitative feedback emphasized the strengths of the program's structure, practicality, and social components, especially the peer pods, while also indicating the need for in-depth facilitator training, greater flexibility in physical and cognitive modifications, and continued cultural responsiveness.
Gosh, I'm sorry that we have just a
Am I
minute
out
or
of time?
two. So yeah, you
Okay,
can so
I'll
maybe
wrap it
just
up really.
highlight it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'll wrap it up quickly. Sorry. Overall, Navigating North offers a solution to bridge the gap between research and practice by translating the evidence from the finger and pointer frameworks into structured community-based program. Developing a formal facilitator training program will be essential to the next steps, and expanding community partnerships with organizations like senior centers, healthcare systems, YMCAs, nonprofits, and other local programs will be key for implementation. Currently, we need to identify sustainable funding sources and a partnership to run the pilot. If the Navigating North program sounds like something your organization might be interested in hosting, we are currently seeking partnership to engage in this. Thank you for having me, and I'm going to just wrap it up there since we're out of time.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And then it sounds like a really great project, and I definitely would like to learn more about the details. So for the interest of time, that if anybody who has questions, about Natasha's presentation or program, please go ahead and then write your questions in the chat, so that maybe Natasha can follow up, on the sideline too. So in the meantime, we need to move on to the next presentation. So Crystal, if you can ready your presentation.
Indeed. Thank you so much. I am going to start sharing from the beginning here. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to this lovely showcase. I am going to steal the idea and apply it at my own university. I hope it's not copyright. I have a brief share. I am a clinician and I primarily work with older adults and I apply narrative therapy. So going into talking about this, I have a bit of a history um, of wanting this approach to be applied in my own bereavement experience, but also working with families, particularly marginalized families that may not feel that counseling is something for them, but they will invite pastoral care into their settings. So what I want to do is start off with a case study, and you all can see that lovely graphic. I'm a little proud of that. And talk a little bit about how it applies to pastoral care. We want to start off with some cultural attributes that may cause some barriers in help seeking. And then we'll land on slide 4 and 5, where we'll talk about theory application. All right, just a highlight of the case study, we have Margaret, 74 years old, 2 siblings, primary caregiver to her mother, whom died at 98 years old for the last 17 years. So that's a big chunk of her adult life. She is widowed and experiencing some challenges post her mother's death, particularly surrounding identity development, feeling a little bit lost in the sense of agency. The challenge with her siblings is they were not, according to Margaret, involved in caregiving. They did not contribute financially as well. So there are some conflicts as they begin to plan the funeral, but they are open to pastoral interventions. So some cultural implications when working with bereaved families. Margaret's family is African American, and we do know that there may be some barriers in help seeking. As from a collectivist culture with moderate interdependence, we see that there is a bit of discomfort with talking about family issues outside of that unit. And so what we do find is that could be historical trauma to maybe mental health illiteracy, not knowing enough about mental health and maybe the stigma attached to that. But fear of appearing to be having a role reversal, not being able to be seen as their normal selves. And then this kind of presumption of being resilient. I'm okay. I don't need any help. I can keep forging ahead without any challenges. And so a lot of the issues that may occur in that community, they tend to talk to one another about it. But what if the family unit is fractured? as what we see here with Margaret's brother and sister, Philip and Angela. So we do see maybe some residual effects. I've been working with bereaved families for a while now and a clinician for 25 years, and observing what may occur during funeral planning is pretty heartbreaking, where we start to see fractured relationships. We start to see that there is challenges with understanding the roles within the family, and maybe a little bit of caregiver ego. And I believe I just made that up. But when we see a person that feels that they were the caregiver, so I will be responsible for planning the entire funeral. I will be responsible for the estate planning. I will be responsible for maybe gathering all the funding for the funeral, but not allowing others to contribute. So we might see some residual effects from a lot of the issues with the roles within a family. So there is a great deal of research surrounding the role of religion in the African American community. You guys may be familiar with the research, and particularly with collectivist cultures. In the Black church, in the Black community, the Black church is very significant. It is responsible for comfort, advocacy, um, caring for the family in a way financially, oftentimes. And so we do believe that it is important to consider the cultural implications when we're doing bereavement support, and not just for African Americans, but every culture. We want to learn the backstory, some of the factors and the attributes that contribute to their family and their dynamics. African Americans tend to believe that there's an afterlife. There's a strong connection to their spirituality and scripture as it relates to death, death awareness, Holy Spirit. And they view death as a natural part of life. Now, I'm going to be careful with my phrasing because we do have subcultural influences, of course, but what we tend to find is that death is acceptable because it's a natural part of life. And with Margaret's mother being 98 years old, it makes sense that her going would be around this time, that she lived a very long and fruitful life. So there's a celebration. And we see that celebration oftentimes in honoring traditions, rituals, food preparation, caring for the deceased member's family. And we see pastoral care very involved with that process. So let's talk about the adaptive processing of grief. I believe that pastors have a very strong role in how the family grieves. Pastoral care is one that you can go to in your church as part of the help ministries, but we are now seeing a really good increase of pastoral care being trained as clinicians. I have students that have masters in divinity, and so they're also licensed clinical professional counselors. So that is a good place that we're going. But in our repast, we see a lot of celebration, food preparation, being able to share a meal and break bread. And during that time, we propose that there's a start to processing grief. Sharing stories. Sharing stories relates to what that person meant to me in my life. And we think about Margaret being a caregiver for 17 years. Again, it's a big chunk of her life. How does she navigate that as a widowed woman and then having siblings that may have been involved in their own family life? This is an opportunity to share stories about what the mother meant to all of them. Now, I will talk in a bit about some disclaimers if you want to start to begin to apply some of this during the repast, but it's really more about the opportunity to be able to celebrate the life while sharing a meal. You can begin to take a look at some of those mementos. You may not start to box those items yet, but looking around the room and saying, hey, this is something that meant a lot to my mother. And pastoral care can be involved in what does that object mean to your mother? Who could best take over that to honor your mother's memory? And then passing the torch. What did the mother mean and in that context of the family unit? and 98 years old, likely the matriarch of the family. So it would make sense of that person being very instrumental in maybe gathering a family, resolving conflicts. Who's going to take on that role within the family? Who has the attributes of taking on that role? So incoming narrative therapy. The tenets we just mentioned are part of narrative therapy and how people are able to view their life challenges. But what I will propose is that with Margaret's family, Philip and Angela, having conflicts during this period, we can utilize narrative therapy to start to mend a fractured relationship. So in this extension of the repath, we can begin with a pastoral or counselor-led counseling. Now, I do believe, as a disclaimer, that it's important to take in consideration that not all the family members need to be involved in this. I would say that if you complete your repast of sharing a meal and having conversation, it would be a good time to transition to a private discussion with Margaret, Philip, and Angela. The goal here is to start to have a discussion about their relationship and their dynamics. At 98 years old, the mother left 3 children. These are adult children, older adults. And this is the primary relationship. And what we might see later on is that that family relationship starts to chip away. At 74, 58, so forth, there may be some cumulative loss as they continue. So how can we address some of these issues now in order for them to have a fruitful relationship? So this offers a real-time bereavement processing of their life challenges. I will say that again, because some of these moments might become very private, that it would be something that you would do towards the end of the repast and continue on with spiritually based group counseling the next day and leave them with a little nugget so they can be able to come back and start to begin to process. Faith-based narrative therapy is something that has been in place for a very long time, but we don't talk about it enough because not enough folk are trained in it. But it does incorporate biblical narratives. It starts to look at some of the ways that people can cope with death and grieving by deconstructing the problem, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But these biblical narratives are part of understanding how people deal with loss. So the first step is to understand the dominant theme. What theme do they tell themselves about who they are as an individual? So the family described Margaret as, I forget what they described her as, forgive me, but they described her as lonely and bitter. And what we see there is that that may not be the way that Margaret describes herself. So we'll first ask Margaret, how do you view yourself, Margaret? Tell me a little bit about how you frame your relationship with others. And Margaret may talk about being angry, that there was not enough support from Philip and from Angela as she began to caregive. And for the 17 years, there was not enough financial support. There was not enough rotating of family care. But we do know that we are oftentimes not great historians. And as a result, we want to be able to know how family views us. I do apologize. That is my dog. And I do apologize for that. Thank you.
Yeah, we have probably 2-3 minutes, Crystal.
Thank you so much. I apologize. And so one of the things that we can do in order to be able to start to connect those narratives, we deconstruct the narrative of what they feel about themselves as a dominant need. The problem is considered to be the problem. And so detaching that anger from that person's primary being, then they tend to see the problem as a part of someone else and not a part of their identity. They begin to grow and change based on understanding that this problem does not have to identify who I am. And so as we begin to deconstruct, we can use reflective exercises like mapping the problem to see how it has engaged us socially. Did it work for us? Did we feel that some of the things that we were doing in order to maintain that dominant theme? Did it lose relationships, i.e., did Philip and Angela, did they detach from Margaret because of her anger? Did we find that individuals did not want to be around her any longer as the kind of secondary matriarch because of her anger? And did Mary identify for herself that anger wasn't something that felt like her? So then we incorporate scripture to talk about how anger and wrath is something that we wear, not who we are, that we come into anger, that anger comes upon us. And we begin to reauthor the story. And to finalize, how does the next chapter look for Margaret and her family and her siblings? Writing the story, talking about roles, talking about death awareness and the end of their own lives, and how does it look as they begin to rebuild their relationship. We can help Margaret and her family regain a sense of agency. And I will suggest that if you're looking at narrative therapy, you look at some of the newer modern contexts of it. The Tree of Life is a useful tool, incorporating life reminiscent groups and being able to adapt it to narrative key tenets. Do you all have any questions?
I can take Beverly one question if you have
Thank you.
anybody. Anybody has a question or
I have a
comment?
question,
Sure.
if that's okay.
Mhm.
This was lovely. Thank you for sharing your work. I'm wondering, in terms of the Black church or church spiritual being central to the community, are you seeing any shifts in that generationally?
I am. We have a great deal of subcultural influences now. And so with the stigma being decreased with even seeking mental health services and beginning to build their mental health literacy, we're seeing a shift. We're seeing more people interested in intergenerational, intercultural worship. We're seeing a shift in those seeking clinical help outside their family unit. I think a challenge for me in working with older adults is that it's happening a little slower with that particular age bracket. And I see some nods because it's sometimes challenging to let go of some of the old stuff and some of the trauma and the hurt. But I do think narrative therapy is a good tool in that regard to help to confront some of those identities that we've worn for a very long time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And your voice is so therapeutic too.
Does it?
I can't
I
listen. Yeah.
I am shaking in my boots because I knew my dog would have a moment and he was taking a nap.
No. I think somehow
The
yeah,
mistress
I like the tone.
But if the mistress of your IT could delete that part where my dog was barking, I would be so appreciative.
Yeah, we didn't really hear it. Right? Thank you
Thank
so much, Crystal.
thank you.
So we're going to move on to the next presentation by Mila and Rachel. So if you can set up your presentation slides, let's just go ahead and
Go ahead
start.
and share my screen.
Mhm.
Oops. Okay. Can everybody see?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Uh, my name's Rachel Holben. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm the manager of the behavioral health program here at Independence at Home. And we are a division of Scan Health Plan. My co-presenter, who you heard a little bit from earlier, is Mila Lillian, and she's the supervisor of our tech program, which is a program that teaches technology coaching to seniors. So you may wonder how mental health and technology coaching work together. And that's what we're going to talk about, and kind of how we came up with this partnership and sort of some of the ideas that we've had to promote technological understanding to kind of support our mental health services that we provide. So just to begin, I want to share a little bit about our mental health program, which is kind of where it began. So our behavioral health program within Independence at Home is called the Insights Program. We've actually been around for longer than 10 years or 11 years, but the current iteration of kind of who we are now was founded in 2015. And we offer free short-term therapy for any older adult 55 and older and any caregiver of someone 55 and older. And we are funded 100% by SCAN Health Plan. So they give us a lump sum of money every year to serve the community. And we actually don't serve SCAN members, which is a little bit confusing. So we are solely based on serving people out there in the community who need services. So we don't charge copays, we don't bill insurance. It's just purely free to anyone that needs counseling. So our main focus, and this is sort of pre-pandemic, still the same, but just kind of talking about our original model, is really looking at people who have barriers to receiving counseling, which is often cost, obviously insurance, transportation, mobility. We have a lot of homebound seniors. Another big barrier that we encounter is language. So we have therapists who speak Spanish, Korean, and Vietnamese in addition to English. So we really look at what are those barriers that are preventing kind of vulnerable, at-risk older adults and caregivers to receiving quality mental health care, and then how can we address that? So pre-2020, all of our services were in LA and Orange County, which is where our program is based. We're based in Long Beach. And all of our services were done in home. So the therapists were driving around, doing home visits in those two counties. So then the pandemic happened, as I'm sure you all experienced that abrupt adjustment to having to make your services, available remotely or via telehealth. So we moved all of our services. Hold on one second. Remove that little bar. Okay, we moved all of our services to telehealth. So we found that our services were still very effective and that people still were really able to engage in mental health, which was a surprise to us. We kind of expected that it would be we'd experience more resistance. However, we found that our clients actually did about the same, kind of looking at some of our pre and post tests. We do a PHQ-9, we do a GAD, we look at anxiety and depression. People did about the same. The major issue that people were having were just using telehealth, like really just being able to log into some of those platforms. So in response to that, in 2022, we launched a program that was called TECH, and it stands for Technology, Education, and Coaching. And that is a one-on-one digital coaching program. So we have two digital coaches, and we partner them with a client who has a specific goal. And that goal could be something like, I want to use Zoom to talk to my therapist. So they will actually go to their house and show them how to do that. So it's really like a hands-on coaching program. And that program was born to facilitate our clients in accessing our mental health program. But then it's kind of evolved from there. And now they can also help with other things that they may need. So after the pandemic, we kind of hit this spot of being able to provide our services telephonically or through Zoom. We realized that we were able to see a lot more people remotely. We were able to expand outside of those two counties of LA and Orange County. We could see anyone in California as long as they're able to access telehealth. So we could see people in rural areas, people in areas that maybe don't have a therapist, especially that speaks their language. So it was able to open up our access. But we found that older adults continued to be really isolated, even as in-person activities kind of started to come back after the pandemic. So even I think it's in 1 in 4 adults 65 and up would be considered socially isolated, which means lacking meaningful connections. And that meaningful part is really important, right? Because sometimes you could have connections, but do you feel connection? Do you feel like that emotional connection to other people? And there are so many barriers that older adults face. People not having a job, sometimes that retirement, that adjustment, those role transitions, health challenges that could affect your mobility or your ability to go and do activities that maybe you enjoy doing, hobbies. Grief and loss is a big one, all these different things that people experience that makes it even more challenging for an older adult than maybe a younger person to kind of get out there and socialize. And I know that in 2023, the Surgeon General released a report that was called The Epidemic of Loneliness. And at that point, identified social isolation and loneliness as an epidemic. And one of the kind of statistics that was cited in that study was that social isolation costs Medicare $6.7 million annually. It increases the risks of dementia, heart disease, and stroke, and it's about the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of how it affects your overall health, just being lonely. So it's pretty alarming information. So all of that being said, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Mila, who's going to talk about how we developed this specific class, Let's Heal and Connect.
Thank you, Rachel. So kind of working along our partnership between our technology program and our mental health program, we really leveraged our connections with our community, which we rely on a lot for our referrals. So we work a lot with places like senior centers, different cities, senior buildings. And so we started offering this course that we thought would be a great way to pull people out into the community and actually meet in person as we were getting out into the community. And what we do is we created a curriculum, and it's 3 separate courses that take place over 3 weeks, and they are interactive, and they are about an hour long. The first part of the course is taught by one of our licensed therapists, and the second part of the course is taught by one of our digital coaches. So it really is a true partnership. And like I said, we are invited into certain communities where we host these classes. People do not have to be technologically savvy to do it. They're really a very basic level. So we try to invite people and try to take away a lot of those fears that people have around working in technology in general. So the idea is really to kind of work with these models. And we have our models that include things based on CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, that really involve things like behavioral activation. So, and when we get to that behavioral activation portion, we want them to actually engage. So what we do is we bring in that digital literacy piece. So a lot of the times after we talk about things like the triangle included in CBT or things like that, then we bring in the component of the technology, which is delivered by the digital coach, in order to really put into action what they're learning in the mental health. So, like I said, we have three classes that we do that, and each model has its own interactivity. And afterwards, we leave them also with a takeaway, so they can practice later what they had learned in the course, and things like it, depending on what we're talking about, is what we're going to be giving away for the takeaway. Again, we don't think this is, and we acknowledge it. That technology is a tool. It is not a replacement for actual interaction, but that's also part of the importance of having these classes. We are in person. They can be done virtually, but we really do try to encourage people to meet these classes in person so we can kind of build upon that, that epidemic and giving them these actual actionable items to where they can interact and have meaningful connection. Next slide. So, kind of going along what we're talking about with the behavioral health piece, we have things like we talk about this cognitive stimulation of that behavioral activation through things like games and puzzles, things that they might be learning online, things that they may not know that is available to them. We try to make the things that we teach them, they don't cost them any money. They're usually free. They're accessible. We try to take away a lot of those barriers. We also try to encourage those linkages to other in-person activities, so we can show them that senior centers are holding other classes, or they can go and connect with other people doing other things, fitness programs. Some people are very basic, so they don't even know like what a search engine is. So we teach them like, how do you access Google or whatever their search engine is of their choice, and then be able to look up those activities in their areas. One of the other components that we teach in one of the classes is things like relaxation and mindfulness. And then to couple it with that, what we do is we teach them things about like the Calm app or accessing YouTube, which is free, and having a lot of those mindfulness exercises or guided meditations, music apps, things that they can help reduce things like anxiety, depression, improve their sleep, all things that are of no cost to them, that is accessible, and that they can take away and actually put into action. Next slide. So this is kind of, like I said, this is something that we developed within ourselves. We also do a short survey pre the first time we meet with them, and then a survey afterwards to see how anything has changed for them. And we want this, make this available to anybody in the community. So if you or somebody you know would like us to come in and do one of these classes or actually engage in any of our services, we're happy to do that. But this is also a way for us to kind of discuss any practical tips that maybe you can implement this with your different areas. If you work in a setting where you can maybe implement some of these classes, we're happy kind of to work with you on that. And the last slide is basically our takeaway information. That is my exact email address. I do a lot of the scheduling. I do a lot of the kind of field questions, and that is our 866 line. We are open Monday through Friday. We're also a resource line, so people call us, and maybe we're not necessarily the exact thing that they need. We do have resource specialists on staff who will then work with them to figure out what other resources are available to them in their community. And then that is our website. It is under construction, so it's not 100% ready to go, but we're working on it to get all the information out there. And we'd love any questions and to field any questions you might have about our programs or about this particular program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mia and Rachel. Great presentation. I can see already the comments that really excited about what you did too. I can take a few questions. If anybody who wants to raise your hand and then ask a question or any comments. Let me just start. So, what do you see as the result, for your clients? And do you see like if people are feeling happier or less lonely, or?
It does. It's definitely something that we want to measure more. We're still sort of developing a tool. We created our own pre and post test that we call the e-social connection survey. And it sort of measures the loneliness part as well as people's comfort level with technology. And we do see improvement. That's sort of a work in progress, but I do know that the classes have been very popular and that people have really enjoyed their experience participating in them. And we're actually thinking ahead to maybe doing some another class that would sort of mirror it, but maybe slightly higher level of technology coaching.
Great. And I see question, how do you transition clients out of care?
Do you mean for this program, for the class, or for our program in general? Is that the question?
Thank you. This is wonderful. And the accessibility, to be able to make that accessible to LA and Orange County, regardless of insurance, that's
We're actually available statewide.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so we started in LA and Orange County in terms of the mental health program. However, because we went to a telehealth model, the actual therapy is available anywhere in the state of California. The technology coaching is still in LA and Orange County only because we do have an in-home component where we would go see the client in their home to help them set up the technology. After that, it is virtual. Sorry, we should have clarified.
Yeah.
Okay. So the technology piece, that 3 weeks that they are able to go through, and then at that point, are they connected to a therapist ideally?
They can be. So our services, so this class is sort of done kind of separately from our individual services. So usually we'll go to like a senior center or maybe a senior building, like an apartment building, and offer this class there. But then if somebody's interested in continuing, like if maybe they identify like, oh, I could really benefit from some more counseling or even maybe some more technological coaching, then they could come to our individual services. So we have the digital coaches who work with people one-on-one. And then we have a team of 10 therapists who also see clients one-on-one. So it's not somebody could participate in the Let's Heal and Connect series and then come and be part of our other services. And we have people who have both a digital coach and a therapist.
Yeah, and the digital coaching lasts anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And the individual counseling services is anywhere 5 to 15 sessions on average. So it really varies. It's very flexible and individualized. We try to take down as many barriers as possible.
If anyone's interested too, you can email Mila. I know that was on the slide.
I can throw my information in the chat too.
And she could share like our referral form for both of the services if you had anybody that might want to be part of either of those programs, or if you were interested in maybe hosting one of these classes.
And we have like 20 other class topics to
We have a
choose
lot
from.
of stuff
This
going
is
on.
just one of the ones we're highlighting.
Yes, just because of the kind of that marriage of technology and coaching. But we do a lot of other stuff too.
Great. Yeah,
Thank you.
Nilla shared her contact information in the chat too. So thank you so much, Nilla, for sharing it, and thank you for what you did.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Celia.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Right. Please go ahead.
Oops. Let's start over, sorry.
Yeah, I can see your slides.
Oh,
Oh,
nothing's happening?
oh no, we were seeing your slide, and then now it disappeared. Do
Oh,
you?
okay.
Yeah, I can see your slide.
All right.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I have to restart.
We can see the slides.
Yeah, you can see this. We can see the slide, Celia. Just go ahead and then advance your slide. Yeah, background. I can see background. Oh,
Oh, okay. So you mean you can see the slides, but you can't hear the audio?
I can. Yeah, we can see you. I can hear you too. I don't.
Okay, so I pre-recorded the audio because I wasn't sure how we were going to present. So I was wondering if you can hear the audio from from the recording. No?
Oh no. I think you were supposed to be speaking.
Ah,
Yeah, so
okay.
you're
I
not gonna.
understand
Yeah, you
now.
need to speak. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, I got it.
So we need to wrap up in 10 minutes. Cecilia, so if you can maybe
Yes.
speed up a little bit.
I'll
Mhm.
get it. Um, all right. Can you still see the slides?
No, I cannot see. Oh, well, yeah, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So my background is in the aging population trends which happened in the Caribbean based on the insert that you're seeing right there. The problem focused on workforce shortage, the fragmenting training systems, poor coordination, and the purpose examined collaborative leadership, the understanding of barriers, and identifying strategies related to the crisis. the literature overview that I uh, examined were based on key gaps in caregiver training systems, the lack of standardized collaboration frameworks, and the research questions that I looked at were: how does collaborative leadership impact caregiver training program planning? And what barriers affect implementation? The methodology was that qualitative case study, and it was a single case study focused in Dominica at the Dominica Council on Aging. The data source that I used were interviews, organizational documents, and out of 85 potential participants, 18 participants were successful in the operation. And so this is the conceptual framework diagram that I used, which harnessed the collective ideas of collaboration. And of course, the findings were fragmented stakeholder alignment, role ambiguity in caregiving definitions, leadership coordination gaps, and the barriers identified were competing stakeholder priorities, resource constraints, governance limitations. And so these are diagrams that I used throughout my dissertation, all with a focus on the mission and the vision. And I used the collaboration theory, which helped explain why caregiver training programs succeed or struggle depending on how stakeholders work together. And the MAP model, which means mobilizing for action through planning and partnerships, was relevant for the study because, because it is a community-based model published by the Public Health Planning, the National Association for Community and let's see, yeah, in collaboration with the CDC, actually. And so the implications were that the standard of care policy, the caregiver education and training, alternative strategies in collaboration, elder care promotion were all part of what were implied. And so the implications based on the research means that training is not a workforce solution only. Collaboration must be structured. Systems and not programs drive outcomes. And so strategic solutions means that structured collaboration frameworks are necessary. Defined leadership roles must exist. Standardized training models are important, and that scalable training systems work. The main takeaway is that training alone is not a workforce solution. Collaboration is not operational, and it is a structural requirement for building a sustainable caregiving workforce, which means that systems and not programs drive outcomes. Thank you very much. I thank CCCG for the opportunity, and if there are any questions, I can answer.
Right? You wrap up really quickly. So we have some time, for a conversation. So any
Yes.
comments? So you said that this is for your dissertation?
Yes, I presented this as a presentation that I did. You should stop sharing now. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us where you are right now in the program?
Oh, so
University?
my dissertation happened in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found it relevant to present today because we're experiencing the shortage of the workforce,
Yeah,
which enhances caregiver training and everything like that. So
right. And then where are you right now? Like geographically?
I'm in Long Beach,
Yeah, in
California.
Long Beach, and then you're working there.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I, I thought I was not supposed to have control of the slides, so I did a pre-recorded slide, and that's where the confusion came. So I apologize for the
No, no, no,
mix-up.
no. Yeah. And then if you want to share that, we can probably find a way to do that too. But
Yes, sure.
yeah, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Right. Okay, so the last but not least, Deanna, you can set up, your presentation slides. And then just for the heads up, after this, we're going to bring everybody back to the main room, for that Best in Showcase voting. So if you could stick around until the end, we would appreciate that too. Okay, Deanna, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana. I am graduate student researcher at the Community Action Research Gerontology Lab at UCSF. And this presentation is titled Caring Through Crisis, a Scoping Review of Challenges Experienced by Caregivers Across Disaster Phases. So a little bit of context about something that we'll be discussing today is climate disaster management. And so climate disaster management, for this scoping review, we went with the term by the United Nations framework of disaster, which categorizes disaster management into three phases, which is preparedness, response, and recovery. And in this scoping review, we were really trying to kind of see what was out there regarding caregivers and their role in supporting their care recipient, especially for this, we really wanted to see caregivers of aging adults and individuals who are living with chronic conditions or disabilities that would impact how their response during a climate disaster. So I'll start off with the question. And so we did use ARCSI and O'Malley's scoping review framework, which is split into 5 different steps. And so the first one is identifying the research question. So again, based on what we wanted to kind of see, we decided to do a scoping review. And this is research in progress. So the question that we're looking at right now is, what are the existing challenges or unmet needs encountered by caregivers of individuals living with disabilities or chronic conditions when preparing for, responding to, and recovering from climate-related disasters? And so that was the main question that we kind of wanted to see what was out there. But then we kind of chose 3 objectives as to why we were looking at challenges and unmet needs specifically. And so for all 3, I think the main goal was to see, one, what is occurring? So what does the literature say? What does the literature say about the role that caregivers have in these 3 stages? And what support is available to them or not available to them? And so those are kind of the approaches we took when developing our objectives. So to identify the relevant studies, after identifying our question, then we kind of also use the population concept context framework. And so for this one, what we did is we kind of showed, okay, what's our population? For this one, it was caregivers of individuals living with disabilities or chronic conditions. But we were also specifically looking at caregivers of those who their care recipients kind of lived in the community, were not in institutions like hospitals or nursing facilities. So we really wanted to see what was occurring for community dwelling care recipients and their caregivers. The concept for this one is, what are the challenges encountered when organizing, planning, or applying resources to prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters? And then the context was climate disasters. So we really wanted to see climate-related disasters, and so I kind of listed the ones that we use, and these also correspond to the different terms that we use when we were searching for articles. So all of these articles kind of set the framework for our inclusion and exclusion criteria. So articles that were in line with this PCC were the inclusion, and then those that didn't were part of our exclusion. So for example, we excluded nurses or individuals who had like licensing or trainings specifically in emergency preparedness by like an institution. So kind of that was anyone who worked like at a hospital or had certifications. So for study selection, after we kind of ran these different terms, we first kind of got around 307. And so this was done independently by two researchers who we had a shared folder in Zotero. When the studies were found, they were placed by respectively the person who found them in the shared folder. So Zotero was automatically kind of deleting, removing any duplicates that were coming in. And then from the Zotero box, we then used a software called Covidence. And so Covidence is a software that allows you to import studies, and then it kind of helps you with the process of screening them. So we got the Zotero folder, inputted that into Covidence. And from Covidence, we got 203. And first, we start off by just looking at the type PCC inclusion criteria. And from there, one of the things that we started to notice was that many of them would include, especially for population, they would include caregivers who didn't fit our specific inclusion criteria. Oftentimes it was nurses or emergency departments, or I think it was CNAs was a popular one. So these are the ones that we kind of removed. And after we'd screened from title, then we did the full text. And so similarly, once we read the full text, we saw which ones kind of fit the inclusion and which ones didn't. And then lastly, after this process, we ended up having 22 studies. And one thing that I'll note for these is the way Covidence works is that it's kind of like a blind where each person has their set. You put yes or no. And if let's say I mark yes, another person mark no, then that kind of goes to like a little separate box that says conflict. And so then we would discuss and we would come to an agreement whether it was included or excluded. And so kind of the process, you go through all of them. If both people mark yes, then it automatically goes to like the next phase. And so this is how Covidence was very helpful. And then with 22 studies that we did get, from there you kind of do what they call like extraction. And so that's where we kind of began to take out some more information. And so this is kind of some information we took out. We were looking at authors, year, study design, care recipient characteristics, caregiver relationships, disaster management phase, like the primary one. Some of them might mention many, or some of them were specifically on one. And so we kind of said, okay, we'll do the focus of the paper for disaster management. And so these are some of the data that we were taking out, and we placed all this in this comparative matrix to then map and compare the studies. And these are some preliminary results. And it's a lot of text to kind of see, but really quickly, the study design that we were looking at, we were only doing peer-reviewed articles. And so so many of the ones that we found were quantitative. Qualitative was, many of the studies were qualitative, mixed method, and then we did have a few scoping reviews. The earliest study was published in 2009, and then the latest was in 2025. But I think there's a type one, it's 2006 is the earliest one. I think I inputted the 9 wrong. Apologies for that. And then of the articles, many of them were on family caregivers. The remaining 2 were, they didn't specify if it was family. They kind of just said caregivers, but they met all the different other qualifications. But most of the articles that we were looking at were family caregivers. They didn't note if they were paid or unpaid in the articles that we were analyzing. And then many other articles were on preparedness, so they focused on preparedness and what were the needs of individuals in the preparedness stage. And response and recovery were 4 each. And then for the country where there were studies were conducted, most of them were the United States, and then there were a few from other parts of the world because we didn't exclude, we didn't exclude by geographic locations. And then lastly, most of them did talk about hurricanes and floods and earthquakes, and the remainders were either they kind of just talked about the topic of climate disasters in general, and so they didn't specify like a specific disaster. Again, many of them were about preparedness, so they weren't looking at an event that had occurred, but more like how do people prepare for disaster. These kind of mostly come from the response and recovery phases. And the themes that we kind of saw across the different papers were climate-related education and training needs, tangible aid and support. So this could be monetary support or having different mobility, accessibility, equipment, and transportation, emotional and psychological needs, and then social support networks. And so a little bit about each. In the preparedness and response phase, that's where we saw most of the climate education theme come out. And this was really talking about having an emergency preparedness plan. Many of the caregivers in the articles that we're looking at kind of talked about how they weren't prepared. Many of the articles noted how because lots of their care recipients had increased needs for the caregivers, trying to then think of a plan was more difficult because they had to account for their individual specific mobility or cognitive needs, or trying to explain an emergency contingency plan or preparing an emergency kit. So it's kind of a lot of the education. Many of those articles were noting how it was difficult to kind of plan for caregivers. And then tangible aid, for those who were looking at emergency disaster kits, one of the needs oftentimes was medication, and they talked about how it was hard to secure medication to keep in an emergency disaster kit. Also, the financial barrier of having to buy multiple things and have them in an emergency kit was also something that caregivers in the articles were noting was difficult. And then, especially for mobility support or for those with for care recipients with cognitive limitations, it was hard to either help them when they were responding to the climate disaster, or trying to explain in advance, like, this is how we would prepare. So there were a lot of different needs that they had, again, specific to their care recipient, and the fact that there weren't many resources available to them that were specific to those needs. And then the last 2 were predominantly seeing in the response and recovery phase. And so social support, because many of these caregivers were family members, oftentimes the caregivers in the articles were speaking about caregivers and how they felt that in these events, they were like the primary person that was having to think through caring for the daily needs of their care recipient, but then also trying to prepare for a climate disaster. And so they felt that they just didn't have support. And so many of them spoke about needing more support from family members, or also the community of how do they respond and how do they recover afterwards. Similarly, recovery, many of them were also went through climate disaster, and so they were grappling with the turmoil of, like, okay, now what do they do, especially if maybe they lost in the articles they talked about how they lost a lot of their homes, And so then that impacted the way that they're kind of doing their day-to-day. And some articles were specifically looking at one time frame, and other articles kind of followed 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. And so this is, again, what we often saw around emotional psychological needs. So those are our preliminary results and where we're at with this research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deanna. I already see 2 questions, so if you can see what are the type of caregivers are you looking? Are these all family caregivers?
Yes. So we were looking at caregivers because we wanted to see what the experience was for caregivers who maybe didn't have official emergency disaster training. We decided to exclude anyone who would have like a certification. So any licensed or certified health professional or institutional-based care. So that's kind of what we went about doing our exclusion. I think most of it was like in the exclusion phase, looking at like nurses, physicians, paramedics, occupational therapists. So many of the articles, when you put caregiving, they do give articles on this population, but because that wasn't the one we're looking at, those are filtered out.
I see. And then one last question: Are there any agencies that offer free disaster kits? Are you aware of any agencies?
I think as far as like the articles and what they were looking at, I think many of them didn't talk about free disaster kits. Many of them were seeing if caregivers had or knew how to put together a disaster kit or what were the challenges with them putting one together. And so that's oftentimes what the articles were looking at.
Okay. That could be another niche that you need to talk about in the article too.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Very timely topic, and then appreciate sharing your preliminary research with us.